Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. He is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And for those of you that are consuming us on YouTube or in video form right now and not just listening to us, look at these lovely lower third graphics we have, Brian. Brand new lower third graphics.
That is amazing.
Peyton, come in here really quickly. I need you to come in here. Peyton Russell, our producer. I need him to jump in.
Yes.
Peyton, these lower third graphics, who are we? Look at you with your Dallas Cowboys shirt on, being a perfect brand ambassador. Give us a shout out. Who are we shouting out for the new graphics, which look super slick?
So this is Ryan Kuchar.
Oh, it's our buddy. It's Ryan Kuchar.
Ryan in the morning. Ryan in the morning. Yeah, he did this for me, and I thank you very much. He's done a lot for us, a lot of lower thirds work for us, but he did hard work on this.
He is a whiz kid. If you are in need of any video production or anything else, that's the guy you want to reach out to, is Ryan Kuchar. So we thank Ryan Kuchar for his assistance here. Brian Broaddus, how has your week been?
I'll tell you what, Robert, it's good to get back into the grind of it. Getting close. The college draft is around the corner. Free agency now is kind of in that mode where maybe you're going to pick and choose a guy or two. But yeah, we're starting to get into pro days. We're starting to get into 30 visits. So yeah, the how to make your team better phase of the draft or free agency, or just overall, some teams are taking really good advantage of it and others aren't. But we'll see. Like I say, the draft is around the corner, and the thing about it is there's a lot of pressure on these guys. There's a lot of pressure on these guys because when you don't play in free agency, my opinion is, I've said this on a couple different platforms, I just feel like though that you're asking these scouts to do a lot of big time work to supplement some of the things that you've some of the things that you've lost. And then also, some of the things that you definitely need to replace with. And so, this isn't going to be easy. I have a feeling, Bobby, it's going to be a draft too, where there's not a lot of flexibility. We start talking about taking the best available player. Can you really afford to take the best available player? There's also business of, how can you recoup a 4? Is there a trade back scenario? Are there things that you need to plan for in this draft? So there is a lot going to be riding on those 3 days for the Dallas Cowboys when we get close to it.
It's interesting. I'm glad you brought up that point about the pressure that's on the personnel department, Will McClay's group.
They'll feel it.
That's the thing, is that, in one way it's a big compliment, right? Like, it's like, we trust you guys so much and we know what you guys have done to help us build this roster. All these different guys there in the scouting department, from like the smallest assistant up through Mitch LaPointe and Will McClay and some of the higher ups here, that it's a big compliment to the work that they do. Yeah. But then at the same time, it is kind of like, but it's also so much pressure, it feels like. It's your margin for error is not very big. Like if you happen to, it's normal for every team. You'll have a draft, or, every few drafts, you're going to have one that's not going to hit. And you're going to miss on some people. It's just the nature. It's the numbers. It's the math of it. But, that's a big ask, because you can't really afford to have one of those drafts when you play in free agency the way that Dallas does. And so a lot of pressure, and to that scouting staff's credit, they've come through time and again.
They have.
They like I said, like every team, they've had a couple where guys didn't pan out, but for the most part, they are constantly supplementing this roster with big time talent. And it looks like you mentioned, Brian, they're going to be asked to do that again. It's kind of going to be like, well, can you bail us out here a little bit? We don't really want to play in these free agency waters, and that's a lot of pressure to put on your scouting staff.
Yeah, and these guys are used to it. They're used to having. As you mentioned, it's a group that does not get a lot of notoriety. There's some excellent scouts that are part of what the Dallas Cowboys do. And, guys and, gals and stuff that work tirelessly, traveling the country looking at these players and, building a board and coming to a consensus. putting your ego aside for a moment so you make sure that you do what's right for the betterment of the program. But yeah, this is one of those, last year for the Cowboys, when you look at, we'll see what happens with Mozzie Smith. We'll see what happens with Schoonmaker. We'll see what happens with Overshown.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with, with Fehoko and others that are, that were part of this last draft. And, it still is, the jury's out on it. You can't say one way or another. They didn't get the production out of it that they've gotten out of previous draft classes, So yeah, the pressure's there, building the boards there with the thought of maybe, Bobby, and this is going to be something that they're going to have to balance, in my opinion, is, are they going to stack their boards dictated by the way their needs are?
Yeah.
How their board will be true. Their board will be true, but will the stack say player 1 to 150, will it be heavy with an offensive tackle? Will it be heavy with center? Will it be heavy with a defensive tackle? Will it be heavy with a linebacker? You want to try and have some balance in your board, but you've also got to make sure that if they really, really, really like a guy, that he's probably going to be in a position, or they're going to make sure that he's in a position where they can draft. We're probably going to hear them at the end of the draft talk about, oh, well, this was the 15th best player on our board, and you're picking at 24. Yeah. Oh, this was we had a first round grade on this guy when we picked at 56. You're probably going to hear a lot of that. So I hate the fact, and I could be dead balls wrong about this, but I don't think I am. Their flexibility of just taking the best available player, which they've been brilliant at. They've been brilliant at taking the best available player, and it served them very, very well. I don't know if they could take a wide receiver at 24 if it's the best player on their board.
Yeah.
And that's why I think their stack is going to, at least through the first 4 rounds, reflect the needs that they have to address to get their team whole again.
Brian, I think a lot of times when people hear about the scouting process, or they hear, talking to fans at times, I hear them, sometimes the perspective, it seems like from some fans, is like, oh, well, Will McClay is grading all these players, or that's what Will McClay is, just, it's his number. People are giving him work and he's just the number. Or maybe some people say, right, well, I know there are area scouts and stuff like that, so the area scouts are responsible for that. And that's the only thing. Brian, is it, one of the things that I think is important for people to realize in terms of when you're talking about this process that Dallas is going through is, if I were to take a random player right now, Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas,
right?
They're a good player, a guy with an ACL injury who you just feel awful for. But, just as an example, you could have the area scout have a grade on him. You could have the, another area scout who's cross-checking it have a grade. A national scout or one of the higher-ups could have a grade. I'm sure Will McClay has a grade. You could have a position coach who does some stuff and puts a grade on. Jeff Blasco may put a grade on the running back there, Jonathan Brooks. So it's one of those things where ultimately you end up maybe having like 5 grades on a guy. And collaboratively you come together and work on that process. Talk about, like, just, knowing Will McClay like you have over the years and stuff like that. Just talk about that process and coming to a consensus, and how the Cowboys will, you're trying to figure out, are you stacking it with needs and other things, but how do they come to that individual conclusion on those players?
Yeah, I think Will does a really good job with this, because what happens in the Cowboy organization, you have a triangle, and you might have heard me talk about this in other platforms, that the Jones family is at the top of the triangle. The scouts are in one corner, and then the coaches are in the other. And Will does a really nice job of balancing all 3 groups, because what happens is, in that room, sometimes you feel like the scouts will feel like the coaches are getting the upper hand here. And then sometimes the coaches are like, no, wait a minute, scouts are getting the upper hand here. And then the Joneses are mad at the scouts because, they see the player differently, or something happens. Will does an outstanding job of managing all three of those from his chair. And you're absolutely right. The way it sets up, area scout gives the first report. Then you have a cross-checker that might have gone in and seen the player in that area as well. Then you got a national guy over the top that will see the player as well. But then maybe you have a guy who's responsible for, you have a really good evaluator of running backs. Every scout has a position, and we go to training camp, Bobby, we see scouts following certain positions. And
that's their guy. That's their boy.
and that might be where all of a sudden the guy who's responsible for the position might put a grade in there as well. And then they come to the grade of a consensus with all that. If there's a discussion or a disagreement between the scouts and the coaches, they go to what's called pod. And pod is a sit down, discuss where we're at. Maybe you sit down with the scout and the couple of coaches and you go through like, listen, this is what I see. And the coach has a way of saying, well, wait a minute, when we play, we need a guy that can do this. And then you become into an agreement with about that, and you come back and you present to the room, and then ultimately that's what puts the tag in. They do it by round, positional by round, and then you'll have what's that stack that you hear me talk about, where it's player 1 to player 150, or how many tags are on your board. And that's when you always say, hey, that's when you got the great example of when Ryan Shazier goes off the board and Johnny Manziel's tag's there with Zach Martin's tag. What happens? What happens then? It's, wait, the next player on our board is Zach Martin. Let's take Zach Martin. Jerry says, wait a minute. Johnny Manziel's on that board.
Yeah.
Steven goes, Jerry, Zach Martin's tag is higher. As a group, we agreed that Zach Martin is a better player than Johnny Manziel on that board.
And they were right.
And they were right. And
Yeah.
that's all you have to do. But as a group, they'll come to a consensus where to place the tag on the board, and then they will come to a consensus of where he fits in the stack. And once you get that stack, those names start coming off the stack, and it will give you a guide of where you're at. Like, you might be in the third round, and all of a sudden you've got second round tags still in the stack, or second round tags still on the board.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned there when you do the pod and you've got a disagreement and you're trying to flesh that out, and you've got like, a group of guys sitting in there discussing it, trying to come to a consensus.
Right.
If there's still friction, because now we're just talking scouting process here for people who are interested. If there's still friction there, or they're not able to come to a consensus, who's the ultimate judge of, all right, this is what we're going to do? Is that Will McClay? Is that Stephen Jones? How do they approach that?
That's, I wasn't ever involved in a pod group. That pod group was something that Will McClay implemented. And, Will was in pro personnel at the time, working with the Desperados when I was in pro scouting myself.
Dallas Desperados, AFL,
Yeah,
great
Will
AFL
did a great
team.
job with that. Yeah. So I've never was in a pod group. So ultimately, I think what happens is you would have scout comes back and explains, coach comes back and explains, Steven, Jerry, Will would be, and head coach would be the ultimate breakers of where they need to put the guy on the board.
Just a little bit of the scouting process there, some of the discussions. And look, the Cowboys
They got
are
a great group of guys that scout over there.
They do. I mean,
they get not enough credit for how good they are.
No, and they are a group that has been together for a long time now, and has generally been able to. Will McClay deserves a ton of credit, I think, for identifying guys. Identifying guys, fostering them. You've seen so many different guys that have grown from like scouting assistants or lower level jobs that have grown through this. Just over the process. If you look at most of their scouting staff, a lot of these guys are guys who have just come up through this organization. Right. It's very rare, a guy who's not there anymore but was there a couple years ago. The Lionel Vitals, who's brought in from outside, that's rare for this organization. They generally like to identify talented scouts, really good talent evaluators, and then help them, foster their growth. And yeah, they do a fantastic job. And if you're ever curious, just go Google Dallas Cowboys scouting staff, and you'll see all the names there. There's a bunch of guys there who do great work. And, they've kept your Dallas Cowboys competitive a lot of ways for a number of years.
And they've got a really difficult job ahead of them right now for this.
It's going to be a tall order. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second. You are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is a season of change for the Dallas Cowboys. Since we last spoke, since we last did a podcast, there have been a couple different moves.
It's like the movie The Purge.
Dude, it is, the horn is sounding.
You hear the siren, and next we're off purging. Yeah.
The siren has sounded. A couple significant moves for the Cowboys in terms of guys who are on their way out the door. The Cowboys released Leighton Vander Esch. He retired.
Yeah, we'll about that.
Yeah. And we'll circle back to that. Michael Gallup gets released ultimately. Tyron Smith signs a deal with the New York Jets, writes a very nice note to Cowboys Nation on social media today and a letter to the organization. I'll be honest, that's probably, even though it's in text, that's probably the most Tyron Smith has ever spoken directly to the fan base in his entire time here, because he's never been a guy who's spoken very much.
AI chat, is that what we get?
Oh, you think he used Chat GPT? You think he Chat GPT'd it? Yeah,
no,
maybe.
I tell you, we were laughing today on 105.3 The Fan on the G-Bag Nation. We were kind of like we were saying that Tyron's like when Gavin Dawson said, "Well, Tyron wrote a message to the fan base," and I said, "Bye." That's what it just dot, you know. And
no, it's not even a bye. It's a grunt.
But no, Tyron, hell of a player. But yeah, if you read through it, it was a very heartfelt. Whether he wrote it out, something the public relations department did, they're very creative folks, or however he did it. You can guarantee that Tyron does mean that this place did mean a lot to him. And I've gone on record before that I felt like that if he got traded or had to go somewhere else, it would be very difficult. And you know what, though, Bobby? I think if Tyron would have played at a subpar level last year.
Yeah, I think Tyron gained more confidence in himself last year. I think Tyron. Yeah, I think Tyron.
Yeah.
Look, I think Tyron was closer to retiring at the end of 22 than he was at the end of this year.
Yes.
I think after he spent 2023 and they kind of staggered his practice schedule, I think Tyron was like, okay, I can do this. We can still do this. I got something left. I'm going to be able to work this out. Okay. And I think that was something that was probably at play there. Now it's interesting. The Cowboys last year, Brian, signed Tyron to a $3.5 million base salary. And the incentives were $500,000, $500,000 for every game that he was active. That's why it was probably a more tense conversation whenever he was told he was sitting out a game due to injury than it had been in the past. It was probably a little bit more when he's sitting there with his arms folded and he looks angry not playing against the Arizona Cardinals. That's because they just said, we're not going to pay you $500,000. Yeah. So that makes sense. But incentives, basically $500,000 and some other playoff incentives, it totaled it up to be around $11 million in incentives. So this Jets deal that he signs is more than double what he had played for as a base salary last year for the Cowboys, $6.5 million, which is still incredibly cheap for a left tackle. But it looks like the incentives, there's about $13.5 million in incentives, which if you break out the math, that looks like probably about $750,000 a game per active, and maybe a couple workout bonuses or something like that. But Brian, when you look at the terms of that deal, do you say to yourself, Dallas could have played in those waters, or do you see how the Cowboys were kind of like, you know what, we're not in the business of doing this right now. We need more reliability.
Yeah, I think that I think they went with an idea maybe at the combine of something similar to what they were going to try and do from last year, and to what you and I have been talking about. I think Tyron Smith's like, whoa, wait a minute now, I played 13 games last year, played at a very high level. Yeah. I mean, he was thinking, I've given you throughout my career, I've given you a lot of myself. I've given you a lot of breaks. Dallas on the flip side of that could say, well, wait a minute, Tyron, you've missed a lot of games in your career. You've had seasons where you played 3 games, 5 games, stuff like that. And we continue to pay you for that. So I think this was one of those, Dallas had an idea what they wanted to do, probably similar. Again, just guessing, not, Please don't clip this and send this to the Cowboys and say that Brian said this. But just my thought is that I kind of feel like that maybe they had an idea where they wanted to go with the money, and Tyron Smith's like, no, I'm playing at a high level. I think I could still do this.
Yeah.
And that's where the disconnect, and that's why they were willing to move on the way they were.
What if you had to issue your best guess right now, starting left tackle week 1, is it Tyler Smith, a draft pick, or a veteran free agent?
My gut, it's going to be a draft pick. But I do believe this, Bobby. I do believe that the Cowboys, whether they move Tyler Smith or keep him at guard, I think hinges on if they get a tackle or not. That's where, and maybe the level of what tackle, maybe the level of what tackle that they get. If they pick a tackle at 24, then I don't think that Tyler Smith's going anywhere. So, but if they don't get one, maybe they get one later. Maybe that's not the plug and play guy. Maybe all of a sudden, we're dealing, in a whole different area where they're looking at this and it's like, we didn't get the guy that we thought we were going to get. And now they pick, and I'm just using an example, and I'm not trying to throw any dirt on this kid, but I saw John Machota's mock draft of the Cowboys. He picked Patrick Paul from Houston, who could be at 6'8", 331 pounds, could be a really good player one day. I don't know if he's a plug and play player right now for the Cowboys.
There's some seasoning that needs to happen there.
I agree. So Dallas has done a great job of taking plug and play offensive linemen. Generally, they're first round guys. But if all of a sudden it turns into, I think initially, it would, if you got Patrick Paul or say, Jordan Morgan from Arizona.
Yeah.
I think Jordan Morgan, and there's people that have him at guard. There's some people that think that he's a guard. I talked to a scout about J.C. Latham from Alabama. This scout told me, he goes, man, I don't think he could play left tackle, but I think he could be an all-pro guard. So, that's kind of where you're dealing. I know a lot of people have had Mims from Georgia. There's some things about Mims you probably need to dig in on, and I'm sure the Cowboys have done their
such
due
little
diligence.
tape. Such little tape.
It's very such little experience.
It's impressive tape, and the traits are really impressive. But Amarius Mims from Georgia, maybe you tighten up a little bit and go, have I seen enough? Is there enough out there to answer questions about what he can be?
There's so much that you can get into about these players, and that's the great thing about the combine. When you don't know a whole hell of a lot about a player, and Mims is a great example. Played 8 games. You can watch some games. He's outstanding. Floor, ceiling, say all those things, trying to explain to me along the way what it all means. But I know it's a big puzzle. They've got to go in there. What if the situation, what if, when they get him on the board in there, what if all of a sudden you're looking at it and you're going, hey, well, maybe this or maybe that. And, we didn't pick up this, or because maybe it's a lack of experience and all that. There's so many things that you can dive into on these players when you get to be around them. You can watch the tape. You could do the interviews. You could see the workouts. There's just so many things involved here that could affect any player, but him especially because he hasn't played a lot of football,
Right.
That's the thing. When you dig in on these guys. You really dig in on these guys. So I think a lot of it has to do, to answer your question, I think they're going to draft a guy. Now, is that guy a plug and play guy for them? Usually a first round guy for them. Offensive lineman is a plug and play.
I'm curious, like you have Mims in the first round, right? Or is he second for you?
I have him in the second round.
Okay, second round, but graded higher, I assume, than Blake Fisher at Notre Dame.
Yes.
And Wallace at Penn State, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But
yes.
Even with that, here's my question for you, Brian. Do you think that if you're just talking about 2024 and playing next year, you have Mims graded higher, would this team be better off with Fisher or Wallace next year? Because those are very experienced players who are pretty technique sound. Just if you're talking about in a 1-year bubble, do you have a better chance at putting a winning football team on the field with one of those guys starting just next year?
Yeah, I think so. Just for the sheer experience. There's your floor and your ceiling thing again, right? I think I got that right.
You love. There's nothing you're more passive aggressive about than the floor and the ceiling.
I'll tell you what. It's one of my favorite things they talk about in scouting. It's one of my favorite. No, I mean, hey, the problem is I'm not very smart in that way. I just watch players, and
you get it.
I do get it. But to me, okay. But to me, like I said, you're really onto something though here. Like. To me, I really do like Fisher from Notre Dame, but he's played right tackle only. All those games at Notre Dame, could he play on the left side? Sure. But do I know that? It's kind of like the whole thing with Barton. Barton and Frazier.
Harrison Barton, yeah.
Barton from Duke, Frazier from West Virginia. It's the whole
Graham
thing.
Barton, not Harrison Barton.
Yeah, Graham. Yeah. But that's the thing with Frazier and Barton. Man, I've seen Frazier play center. I've seen him play. Maybe I have to go back and grab that Barton tape from Duke when he was a freshman and, early season and playing and seeing how that all works. But that's kind of where we're at right now. That's, where to me, I'm just trying my best in the first round not to pick the player that has the most holes in him. I'm trying to get a very solid player, a very dependable player. Hell, they did it with Travis Frederick. There were people killed that pick. People killed that pick. That guy more people were wrong about Frederick because he's too slow. He's not athletic. He can't get to the second level. He can't cut the defense snap. BS. He did all that.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. I mean, a lot of people may not remember 11 years ago what the narrative was. The narrative around Travis Frederick when he was picked was just as anti.
He was very blah.
It was the same reaction that Tyler Smith got from a lot of people.
Exactly.
Which they ended up being wrong about both those guys. Those have been two really good picks for the Cowboys.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why the Cowboys trust their scouting staff like they do. Now I'm curious. Right. I got a question for you, Brian. Let's you mentioned you think where Tyler Smith plays depends on what they do in the draft.
I think so, Bobby. That's just me. That's me.
I think you're right. I think you're dead on. I think you are dead on about that. Here's my question. If you take the other, we've all talked about, maybe Brock Hoffman is a contingency for them at center. Maybe TJ Bass is a contingency for them at guard. If they were not to move Tyler Smith and they had to play one of their other tackles at left tackle, who do you have the most confidence in Awesome Richards, Josh Ball, and Matt Waletzko?
Awesome Richards.
And is that just based off the tape that you saw at college, or is that?
I talked to Will McClay about this, and usually when you take a tackle, to me, I'm looking for a guy with traits where they took him. I believe it was a 5th-round player, right? Am I correct on that?
Yep.
I'm watching him block guys from Notre Dame, that Foskey and those guys. I'm watching him block guys at Clemson. I'm watching him block guys at Florida State, Verse. I'm watching him block those guys, and he's doing okay. I have more confidence in his ability to block and to get better. But if Matt Waletzko didn't have his shoulders subluxation every other week, and again, I'm being very.
No, it's a nagging injury. It has been a nagging,
and they did. They repaired him, and gotta hope the kid gets through it because he's tough. He's everything. I mean, but to me, Awesome Richards coming out of school is a better player, just a better player. And the sad thing to me was that Awesome Richards, he wasn't ready, but he got no sniff. They went with Adoga, who we'd seen play right tackle and not play very well. And there were times where Adoga was fine, but the majority of that Miami game, he wasn't. So, now you're sitting there, do you know any more about Adoga? Excuse me, do you know any more about Awesome Richards? You really don't. You really don't. And they got a lot of players like that. Eric Scott, that's another one, the cornerback.
Boy, that was a guy Dan Quinn was a Big fan of that.
See, that's what I'm saying.
I think when you look at guys and not to dovetail too far off, but I think when you look at guys who like Dan Quinn leaving could impact, they're standing here like recent picks that could be Eric Scott's one that stands out to me because I know that was somebody Dan Quinn was really, really high on. And if Mike Zimmer views him a little differently, it may not add up for them the same sort of way.
Right. You're absolutely right about that.
You are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love the Star mailbag. Lots of questions this week. In fact, I'm going to kick off with this one from Keith Whitehead because I know you love these ones where you get the opportunity, like you get multiple choice and you get to pick which one you want or stack them up.
Who would you rather?
It's sort of like that. So this is a number of these. You may need a pen and paper here if you got one next to you. You got one?
I do, Bobby. Let me make sure my pen works.
All right.
I've got a pen. I got a Scouts pen here because it's got multiple colors. You can write
look
for
at
different
you.
games.
You're the most popular boy in school.
All right, here we go. Go for it.
So here are list these guys in order based on confidence if needed to play. Okay.
Confidence. Got it.
TJ Bass at left guard.
Got it.
Brock Hoffman at center.
Hoff, center. Got it.
Jalen Tolbert at wide receiver 3.
Tolbert, wide 3. Got it.
Israel Mukuamu at outside cornerback.
Okay. Got it.
Sam Williams at edge.
That's a beauty right now.
DeMarvion Overshone or Damone Clark. Either one you can pick at weak side linebacker.
Clark over linebacker. Power rank them?
Yep. Who you have the most confidence in to the least if they had to step in and play.
Bass, number 1. I have confidence in, I think I would have confidence in Hoffman, number 2. I would have confidence, number 3, in the, I'd have confidence in number 3 in the Clark Overshone combo platter.
It's interesting. It's interesting because that question, my confidence level is vastly different in those two. I have confidence in Overshone. Look, Overshone coming off of an injury.
It's a combo platter, right? Or is it just one or the other?
It just says Overshone / Clark playing Will.
I have confidence in Overshone as number 3.
I do too.
Okay. Then I would have confidence in Tolbert as a 4. I'd have confidence in
Tolbert as a 3.
Tolbert as a 4.
Well, no, this is as Tolbert as a 3 receiver though.
Yeah, no, I said 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gotcha.
1, 2, 3, 4. So it's Bass, Hoffman, Overshone, Tolbert. 5 would be Mukuamu.
Wow.
6 would be Williams.
I think there's a lot of people that are going to be surprised by that. What is it that has you low on Sam Williams there?
The consistency there. I mean, Sam Williams to me
more than just the penalties.
More than penalties, man. It's like doing your job. You know, I mean, that is one of the most talented. That is a David Irving type of a player right there that can make a play at any moment of the game, and he can also line up off sides, or he also can get a penalty.
Right.
He could also. I mean, the confidence that I have confidence that he will do something great. I also have more confidence that he will do something effed up in the game too. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, Mukuamu is one of those ones that's kind of, I don't know, maybe the train's left the station on that one too.
We've seen it in camp, but that's the problem. We've only been able to see it in camp, and so it's really hard to have total confidence in that. I know he has a ton of confidence in his ability to play corner. I've seen him do some impressive things during training camp reps opposite CeeDee Lamb. I saw him carry CeeDee Lamb across the field in the practice when nobody else did.
Yeah.
And break up a pass. And so I don't know. I think right now I'm still, and I was a giant Jalen Tolbert fan. I wanted them to take Jalen Tolbert in the second round.
Yeah.
And there were things that improved last year. There were times he came up with some big plays. Philly, he had some good plays
there
for
are
you.
So many better receivers in this draft than Jalen Tolbert.
And that's where it's just I don't know how much confidence I would have in Tolbert right now stepping up and playing receiver 3.
And
I agree with you that TJ Bass is number 1 for me.
Okay, let me tell you this though about Hoffman. And I know they need a center. If they don't get a center, I'm confident Hoffman can play. I'm confident he can play.
I think they believe in his ability to like the mental processing and everything.
I would much rather. There's probably 4 other centers that I would rather have than Hoffman playing right now. So,
well, here's the next question for you then, Brian, from Coach Burton. Would you rather have Hoffman starting at center, or take Limmer in the 3rd to start at center?
Man, I like Limmer.
Do you like him in the 3rd round?
I have him in the 4th.
So taking a 3rd round pick on Limmer to start, would you rather do that, or would you rather have Hoffman start and use your 3rd round pick in another way?
I think I would probably, okay, maybe I have Limmer for him. He's got him as a 3rd round guy. I have him as a 4th. I think I would take Hoffman. I think I would take Hoffman there too.
I think I would too, because I got Limmer in the 4th too, and I think that when you're talking about the capital
Van
that they have,
Pran from Georgia,
I've got him in the 3rd.
That's what I'm saying. Me too. If you told me Van Pran, Georgia, or Hoffman, I'm taking Van Pran.
And you got to figure out what you're comfortable with, because as it stands right now, the Cowboys don't have a 4th round pick. They've just got their top 3, and then there's going to be a waiting game. And that brings us to our next question from Steve Allen, Brian. What are the chances of a trade back in round 1? And could they possibly trade back in, say, the 1st and 2nd, or maybe 2nd and 3rd, stack up as many picks as possible? Do you think the Cowboys are going to be in the business of trading back this year?
Yeah, I think John Machota, the Athletic, who does a hell of a job. I love Johnny Matches.
One of the best people you will ever meet, John Machota.
Absolutely. And he did a trade back. He went to Baltimore, and the numbers add up. He went from Dallas at 24 to Baltimore at 30. I believe he picked up number 96, and it was like 120 point difference on it. And I think it was the trade of that pick is 128. So yeah, it's a workable, it's a fair kind of a deal. But what that 96 is, that's a late 3. Okay. So all of a sudden now you're sitting there with 30, 56.
90. It's 30. It would be 30, 56, 87, and 93 from Baltimore.
93. It's not 96, right? So it's 93.
Yep. 93. Yep.
Okay. There. I knew it was one of those. Okay. So there you go. 30, 56, 87, 93. Man, you can do some damage right there picking that way. There was a trade with Buffalo that we had that picked up. I think Buffalo, you picked up one of their 88 or 89, one of those picks right there that they had. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to go back to Buffalo at 28, if you want to go back to Baltimore at 30, those are the picks that will net you that late 3, which could be tremendous because you're not going to be able to play in that 4th round right now. You know, do you like this class more than the last 2 years when people have said the last 2 years I do.
They said it was not top heavy. There were like people were having 13, 14 first round grades, but they said it was a good depth draft. This feels like a good depth draft, and it feels like it's got a decent amount of talent at the top.
There's some positions, Bobby, where if I was sitting in a war room and I'm thinking I gotta get a wide receiver here, but wait a minute. Maybe I could best available player this guy at another position, and I could swing back and get the wide receiver because the 2nd round wide receiver might be very similar to the 3rd round wide receiver. You know, there might be some of that, you know, depending. What if you like a guy like a Ricky Pearsall from Florida? Yeah. You know, but you know what? You flip it around and you're looking at you're talking about, well, maybe if you would, well, he could be Roman Wilson from Michigan. You know, maybe you can get him a little bit, maybe on that, you know, depending on how far down you want to go or circle back around. The wide receiver depth, I think, is excellent. I think the cornerback depth is excellent in this thing. Where you're hurt a little bit is I haven't seen as many guards, and maybe my list of guys, you know, that my last 50 or so guys, I need to kind of hone in on some positions and try and find some depth at tight end, try and find a little bit more depth at guard would be in one.
Tight end and guard are by far for me the 2 positions I have the fewest top 2 round grades on.
See, that's what I'm saying. I need to circle back And I'm done looking at defensive ends. Now I need to maybe find a defensive tackle or two. Maybe stretch that thing a little further if I can. But corners, safeties, linebackers, I think stretch a little bit for me there. Wide receivers for sure. And wide receiver room is, you could put 12 guys in the second round if you want. You want to be that
honestly,
guy?
yeah.
I mean, so I just kind of feel like that there are going to be some positions where people say, hey, I can get the second round player in the third round. I think we're going to, and maybe some people will go and take a guy that a best available player, because they're like, well, hell, I got to grab BB from Kansas State here because I'm not going to get a guard coming back around. Maybe I have a wide receiver. Maybe I have BB. Man, wait a minute. I'm going to take BB because I can't get him around later. I could get a wide receiver around later, or maybe I've got Frazier. Maybe I got Frazier in there, well, I need a center. And well, no, I'm going to grab this corner and I'm going to circle back around and get Limmer, Arkansas, Van Pram, Georgia, that kind of thing. So
this is an interesting question. I like this one. You just mentioned Ricky Pearsall from Florida. We'll finish with this one.
I really like this player a lot.
I do as well. This is a question from Todd. What style of receiver do you think would help the Cowboys offense the most? Would it be a true X? Maybe he said somebody like Brian Thomas. I feel like the true X in this class is Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman from Florida State. A yards after catch gadget guy, and he mentions Malachi Corley at West Virginia, Western Michigan.
Yes,
I really like Corley, or someone who's kind
Kentucky.
Western Michigan. And
Corley?
then Corley. Yeah, Corley's not you got it right. I screwed it up. He's Western Kentucky.
Gotcha.
All the Westerns are screwing me up.
Yeah.
I just said Virginia, then Michigan, and it was actually Kentucky. I'm sitting here thinking of Corey Davis from years ago. Yards after catch gadget guy in Corley, or someone more versatile, kind of good at everything. And he mentions Ricky Pearsall from Florida. So which one of those types of receivers do you think would fit into what the Cowboys need right now? A Keon Coleman from Florida State, Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky, or Ricky Pearsall from Florida? Which of those guys do you think fits what they need?
Corley's a pain in the ass to tackle. Throw him the ball.
Is there a little? I think the common one people have thrown out to him here is there a little bit of Debo to him?
Yes. Yeah. Because all of a sudden you throw him the ball and he's just running over people,
Yeah.
And then, I'll tell you another. Coleman ran what he ran, right? Coleman returns punts. You see him, Coleman, you see him run after catch. Coleman, you see now, there's things, maybe a drop or two that you've seen along the way with him. But Coleman from Florida State, Mitchell from Texas, Corley, Western Kentucky, McConkey's another one from Georgia.
Lad McConkey from Georgia, yep.
Holy jeez. That's the kind of guy that, we all saw what Puka Nacua could do in an offense. And I think McConkey might even have better hands than Puka Nacua when it comes to catching and run after catch. You see some separation there with him. Pearsall's the same damn way from Florida. You hand him the ball. You throw him the ball on the screens. You throw him the ball down the field. You throw him the ball in the middle of the field. Pearsall is a tremendous player.
Pearsall's athletic testing was absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Did you feel like it showed up on tape? Like, I did see athleticism on tape, but I didn't see that much. I didn't see one of the top receiver athletes at the combine.
Yeah, I think the offense at Florida probably not. Graham Mertz, our transfer from Wisconsin, I think was the quarterback there. I think I got him right. Mertz, sometimes all over the place with the ball. Pearsall made some unbelievable catches. I don't know how significant or how advanced the Florida. I'm sure Chuck Cooperstein, if he was listening, is play-by-play voice of the Mavs, is a Florida grad. But he always complains about the Florida offense too. But, there's some guys like the run after catch giants. I think, we said Corley, McConkey, Pearsall, Leggett from South Carolina, Look at, Look at a guy like that gets open all the time. Look at McMillan from Washington.
Yeah.
You know, there are some get open dudes in this thing.
I think Burton at Alabama gets open pretty consistently.
Yeah, but I think Burton is a body catcher, and that bothers me. I've lived the body catcher. He can run under the deep ball. He sometimes contorts. We've had a couple of times where we've dealt with body catchers. We dealt with we dealt with our guy Williams from
Terrence Williams. Yep,
Terrence Williams. We dealt with Michael Gallup a little bit here. I'll tell you a really interesting guy that I don't know where to. I just think he makes plays when you're talking about wide receivers. Johnny Wilson from Florida State.
Sure.
You know, I mean, that's a 6'6", 231-pound man running routes. He's a mid 4.5 guy, you know, but you look at the plays that he's able to make, you know, and you got to go through the history of big receivers. I mean, it's, you know, our guy down in Tampa is a 6'5" guy. There's a lot of 6'4", really big time receivers. But, you know, you got to look at guys that are 6'5", and, you know, this kid's 6'6". You know? Yeah. There's not a lot of, I think there was a kid, was it Colin Johnson? Texas?
Colin Johnson from Texas.
Was a 6'6" guy.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't know. I mean, but he's an interesting kid because every ball thrown his direction, he catches. You know,
we mentioned Ricky Pearsall. He came to the combine, Brian. He was 6'1", 189 pounds.
Yeah.
And then he goes out there. He runs a 4.4 140. His vertical was 42 inches.
Yeah.
His broad was over 10 feet.
His shuttle was
shuttle was 405. His 3-cone was 664. Now, what's interesting, those are all very elite numbers. What's not an elite number, interestingly enough, his 10-yard split was 157, which is pretty generic.
Yeah.
But he's one of these guys who he builds up speed. He's a long speed guy.
Pearsall or Worthy from Texas?
I have Pearsall graded higher.
You should too.
I have Pearsall graded significantly higher, actually.
Yeah. Is it because Worthy is 165 pounds?
I worry, and not that this is what everybody's going to be guilty of. I worry that the tape isn't going to make. He is absolutely somebody. He gets the ball in his hands. You can see that 4.21 speed. It's out there. Like he is fast.
Yeah.
But for me with Worthy is that I don't know that. I don't see. I see athlete. I don't see receiver. I don't see professional wide receiver. I mean, Pearsall, I see a legit receiver.
Yeah.
And Pearsall to me, actually, I've got Pearsall. Which receiver is he for me? This is a deep class. He's the 8th receiver for me.
There you go. You've got him right.
And I really like Ricky Pearsall. So that we covered a lot of ground today, Brian. Look at that. We ran through a number of different things. We're able to touch on draft prospects, Tyron Smith, the new graphics, thanks to Ryan Cottrell.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate
We've covered so much ground today, and we'll continue to cover a lot of ground as we progress forward into the offseason. Hopefully, we get some more developments for your Dallas Cowboys, and it's not just going to keep being
30 visits. 30 visits
are
Get ready
coming.
30 visits in April.
They're coming, baby, and hopefully you can find a trade partner and pick you up some extra draft capital so that the scouts can save this roster once again. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We'll talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.